Hello everyone, it's Elena and I'm back for another video, and today I'm going to show you guys how I take notes on my iPad Pro in law school. Now at Cambridge you have a supervision and lecture system, so I use these lecture notes which I also make on GoodNotes, and then these reading notes which I make on Pages so that I can base my notes on them. Basically my reading notes are just, notes of all the things that I had to read for a supervision. And then there's also my supervision notes, and supervision notes are basically just minutes from, the conversations we have in the supervision, because we just talk about the readings. And from these three, I then make my study notes, which look like this. And I'm going to show you guys today how I do it. So here's one of the notebooks that I have in GoodNotes. I have a notebook for every topic and every subject that I need to study. And I use dark paper because it's easier for me to focus on that, and I feel like it looks a little cool, so I like using that. And as you can see, I use a lot of pictures, quite a bit of color, and I just try to make them aesthetically pleasing so that I want to look at them and revise from them, because I feel like when my notes look good, I actually have more of a motivation to read over them. So let's take a look. Here's one of the notebooks that I'm currently working on, which is Fuller for jurisprudence. And as you can see, the pages which I'm actually still working on are actually not blank dark paper, but instead they're square dark paper. You can always change that later and then it just looks really neat and clean, but while you work on it, it's easier if you just have squared paper, because that works a lot better. So I use 0.55 millimeters for my headings, and I really like just drawing something quick and easy, and it makes it super easy, GoodNotes, to do that, because you can just use the shape tool and then you just basically start drawing, and you don't need to, be able to draw any straight lines. GoodNotes straightens them for them. So you just draw one straight line, put in your title, and then you just, draw the rest of it, and it looks really super easy because GoodNotes just makes it straight, so that it looks quite nice. And then you just fill out a triangle and you have a nice little title. Now as you can see here, I do use color, but honestly there's no specific meaning to it. I just try to make it stand out so that I can see where the text is separated. And I also use pictures, which I literally just take from the internet. I am not selling these notes or anything, so I guess that's fine. Now here's another notebook. This one's already done, and as you can see here, once again, lots of pictures. By the way, if you're looking for things that aren't just in square format but like this crown or the king, I usually just type in whatever I want, for example crown, and then clip art and transparent background, and then Google gives me what I'm looking for usually. And as you can see here, once again, lots of color, no real meaning, but occasionally there are symbols and they do have meaning. So sometimes red means it's important, but not always. There's really no system to it. But I just try to make sure that I can see if there's something really important so that I remember, look at that, it matters. Now I also have these very simplified comments, like here it's a no from me. That's just so I know where the arguments belong, like where in the debate does this person stand. It's just much easier for me, at least, if I just have like a general quick comment like, oh, this is where in the debate to put this, and then you can read through the more academic comments and figure out how they fit into the topic. I also use subheadings, as you can see here, and I use a lighter pink for that. And I use 0.45 millimeters for these, but it honestly doesn't matter. You can also write it in 0.5. It really looks the same. And once again, here you can see one of these very simplified ways of just showing where people are in the debate. For me, that's something that works really well. Sometimes it's a little silly to come up with these comments and just put them in academics' mouths, but I'm telling you, it really helps when you're revising. And in my opinion, it also makes it just a little bit cooler to look into your notes, because you're basically staging the fight between academics, because academics do fight, they disagree. They just do it less rudely. But you can just put some words in your mouth like I did here with, it sounds like a concession. and things like that, so that it's cooler to look at it and that you're having more fun while revising, because revising should be fun at the end of the day. Now, I mainly use white, but as I said, I use a lot of colors. But when I do use white for writing, then I use 0.2 millimeters. And yeah, I think that's a great size because it's very readable, even, you know, when you zoom out, but it's still quite a useful thing. And here, once again, I have these subheadings in 0.45 millimeters, which I think are just really useful because these are things that don't deserve their own heading, but they're helpful. And I use a lot of academics pictures, which I literally just take from the internet. There's no good reason for it. I think it just makes it, you know, more real that there's a debate between actual people. And yeah, it just makes it easier to imagine them having a conversation about jurisprudence, which kind of helps me while studying. So yeah, as I said, from these 3 pieces of written notes, I then make my study notes, which are all handwritten in a way. I mean, it's digital handwriting, but I just feel like digital handwriting is almost as good as handwriting on paper, and it just allows me to bring my notes everywhere and still have that effect of, you know, memorizing things better because of your handwriting. And now we're going to go to my lecture handouts, which I also write in GoodNotes. I get them from my lecturers, export them as a PDF so that I can edit them in GoodNotes, and I always space them out massively. So I usually go for 2.0 or even 3.0 spacing, depending on the subject, and that just helps me, you know, to be able to write everything I want in there. Now I'm going to explain to you guys what the colors of the different highlighters mean, if there's any meaning to the colors of the writing, and yeah, just basically how I structure my notes. It's a very different approach than I use for my study notes, because obviously lecture handouts serve a very different purpose than my revision notes, so that's why I treat them quite differently. Here's an example handout from Contract Law on Undue Influence. As you can see, there's this purple highlighter, which I use for just important information. It is 4.6 millimeters as a size, in case you guys are interested. And I just use that for anything that's relevant. Then I sometimes draw, just if, you know, there's a description which I feel like deserves a little diagram or something, then I just do that quickly in lectures. But here the objective is not to look fancy, but instead just to be practical, just quickly show the information. It doesn't need to look perfect. And I mostly write, so whenever I write, I usually use blue as like my first color, but it really doesn't matter. And I use 0.2 millimeters, just like in my study notes, to write everything out, because I feel like anything less than 0.2 millimeters looks a bit weird when printing it, but anything more gets a little too thick. So for me, that's like the perfect size for printing it. And yeah, I do use different colors, as you can see, for example, here, but I really just use them to separate one text from the other. So for example, some facts from a conclusion, things like that, just so I can see these are different things. And then I also use a green highlighter, which I use for case law, but also for statutes, just so I know it's not information, but it's case law or statute, which, I don't know, for me in my memorization process, it has a different status. So that's why it deserves a different color. Once again, here you can see using different colors just to separate text, because everything is so crammed, so I need to make sure I know this is something else. Now I also do sometimes draw boxes around important things just to make sure I remember them. I use 0.45 millimeters as a size, and then I just use the shape tool from GoodNotes. The shape tool is a lifesaver in lectures because it allows you to just quickly draw a really ugly rectangle and turn it into something nice. So it's a really quick way of just, you know, making important information stand out when highlighting would be a bit much because it's just a lot. I also sometimes underline things which aren't as important that they deserve a highlight, but they're still important, but that's pretty rare because I mainly focus on highlighting. Now here you can see lots of colors, so some blue, some purple, pink, and then even some red. Once again, there's no specific meaning to the colors, it's really just separating the text so that I can easily see something is facts, something is a conclusion, something is obiter, etc., etc. Just keeping everything apart to make sure I know these are different things. Now, as you can see, I write pretty small, but I found that this is still fine for printing. Like whenever I print it out, I can read it, so that's great. But you have to be quick in lectures, so I sometimes use symbols like this very ugly house. I hope you could tell it's a house. But yeah, that's just a safe space, and also be quick in lectures because even though you're digitally handwriting, it doesn't make it much faster. So you gotta make sure you can keep up. Now the one highlighting color that wasn't on here was this dark blue, which I use for further reading. So whenever there's a recommended article or something on the lecture handout, I highlight it in blue so that when I look over it, I know that I need to go back and read this because it matters. And yep, that's pretty much how I make my lecture handouts. As you can see, the main approach is just being practical, make sure the information is clear, so that I can then turn it into something fancy on my revision notes. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you would like to have a video on my reading notes, which I type on pages, please let me know and I can make one in the future. And thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Bye!